Helen Keller was a deafblind activist, author, and educator who fought for many rights. Despite her lack of sight, she was always put together. Her hair was done properly and she had a soft smile. She had her eyes surgically removed and replaced with blue glass ones. "I want all the handicapped to look nice," she said. Most people are only educated about certain glorified parts of her life. For example, you may learn that she was deafblind, how she was taught, and a few of her achievements. The truth is that Helen Keller achieved many great things and created lasting impacts that are still evident today. In today's world, about 22 million or 11% of people live with disabilities. The rights that many consider today as basic human rights were not available to many of the disabled community in the past. This change is largely due to Helen Keller. Most people don't realize the extent of what she went through and all that she achieved in her lifetime. Helen Keller was a deafblind activist who assumed the responsibility of advocating for the rights of disabled people worldwide. Job opportunities for blind people were limited. As highlighted by Helen Keller in her 1903 speech, it's terrible to be blind and to be uneducated, but it's worse for the blind who have finished their education to be idle. People with disabilities faced unfair treatment, often ending up in poorhouses. Anne Sullivan, nicknamed Annie, who eventually became Keller's teacher and lifelong companion, was an example. Annie suffered from trachoma, a bacterial eye infection at a young age, leaving her nearly blind. She faced a tragic childhood, including the death of her mother and abandonment from her father. She and her brother were sent to an almshouse, where he died just months later, and she endured several unsuccessful eye surgeries. During her time at the almshouse, there were several reports of sexual assault and cannibalism. In 1880, Franklin Benjamin Sanborn came to inspect the almshouse. Sullivan pleaded with Sanborn to allow her admission to Perkins, and a couple months later, Anne received admission and began her time at Perkins. Helen Keller was born in Tuscumbia, Alabama on June 27, 1880. At 19 months old, she suffered a severe illness that left her blind and deaf. By age 5, she had developed a system of rudimentary signs to communicate with her family, though her inability to speak frustrated her. By the time she was 7, temper tantrums and incessant screaming were present in the Keller household. Concerned for her future, her mother, Kate, sought the help of Alexander Graham Bell, who connected them with the Perkins Institution for the Blind. On March 3, 1887, Anne Sullivan arrived to teach Helen. As a recent graduate from Perkins, Anne believed that the way to reach Helen was through love and discipline. They moved into a small cottage on the grounds of Ivy Green. A breakthrough occurred when Anne attempted to teach Helen the word water. By pumping water over Helen's hand and signing the word into her other palm, Helen finally understood the meaning of Anne's gestures. This moment was later described in her autobiography, The Story of My Life. "That living word awakened my soul, gave it light, hope, joy, set it free." From that day forward, Helen flourished, eagerly absorbing knowledge. By age 10, she had mastered the manual and braille alphabets and was beginning to learn to speak from Sarah Fuller, although she was never fully content with her voice. Her schooling led her to the Radcliffe College, where she graduated cum laude in 1904, becoming the first deafblind person to earn a Bachelor of the Arts degree. Helen Keller's life story shows the power of perseverance and demonstrates the bond between a dedicated teacher and her determined student.
When I saw Helen Keller first, she was 6 years and 8 months old. She had been blind and deaf and mute since her 19th month as the result of an illness. She had no way of communicating with those around her.
Helen Keller met the renowned author Mark Twain when she was just 14. Their meeting at a gathering in New York arranged by Twain's friend Lawrence Hutton left a lasting impression on Keller, who admired Twain's personality and intellect. In a letter to Twain's wife Olivia L. Clemens in 1903, Helen Keller wrote every word he said amidst his great lovable personality and brilliant thought. Following her college graduation, she dedicated her life to advocating for the blind and transforming societal perceptions of disability. Keller and her teacher Anne Sullivan bought a house in Wrentham, Massachusetts, where Keller became an active member of the American Socialist Party, promoting equal rights and women's suffrage. She traveled the world, giving lectures on the capabilities of the handicapped and working tirelessly to enhance her speech. Tragedy struck in February 1917 when a fire broke out in her home. Fortunately, Keller managed to alert her mother just in time for the fire department to arrive. This incident deeply affected her, making her acutely aware of the safety concerns her blindness posed. In 1918, Keller Sullivan and a friend named Polly ventured to Hollywood to film Deliverance, showcasing the triumph over deafblindness. The film, while it was praised in the national press, was not a commercial success. By 1920, the duo was performing on the vaudeville circuit, sharing Keller's remarkable journey and challenging public perceptions about disabilities. Through her resilience and advocacy, Keller became a beacon of hope and inspiration for many, proving the incredible potential within every individual, regardless of their challenges.
I am not the
Helen Keller was an extraordinary individual, yet many doubted her abilities, labeling her a fraud. While at Perkins, she wrote The Frost King as a birthday gift for Michael Anagnos, the dean, who published it in the school magazine. The story resembled Margaret T. Canby's Birdie and His Fairy Friends, leading to accusations against Keller. She claimed no memory of the book being read to her and was heartbroken by the doubts of those she trusted. Anagnos believed her, but later concluded that Sullivan had read the story to her. A trial was held where Keller faced intense questioning, which terrified her. Helen reflected on the hostile atmosphere during the proceedings. She later wrote, "When I went into the room where Mr. Anagnos had so often held me on his knee, and forgetting his many cares, had shared in my frolics, and found there persons who seemed to doubt me, I felt there was something hostile and menacing in that very atmosphere, and subsequent events have borne out this impression." Was placed on Anne Sullivan, as many thought she had convinced Keller to write the story. While both of them denied this, the public view of Anne remained the same. Both Keller and Sullivan were always resentful of her treatment, as she was often overlooked. In reality, Sullivan was greatly responsible for Helen's achievements. Justin Gardner, the Helen Keller archivist at the American Printing House for the Blind, said, "Visually impaired herself, Anne very literally devoted her entire life to Helen from her arrival at Ivy Green in 1887 to her death in 1936. Helen Keller would not be the person that we know without Anne."
In 1920, Keller helped found the American Civil Liberties Union with activist Roger Nash Baldwin and others. Their efforts led to the better treatment of the blind and deaf. She made a side trip to Nebraska in 1947 after being appalled by the lack of attention to the blind in the state. She also helped raise money for children in Europe during World War II. Anne Sullivan passed away in 1936 after a period of illness due to heart problems. Afterwards, Polly Thompson, Anne's old nurse, assisted Helen in many ways, though they were never as close as she and Anne. Helen is best known for advocating for the blind, but she was involved in activism for many different causes. For example, Helen Keller was an early supporter of birth control. In the 1950s, Margaret Sanger founded the Planned Parenthood Association, or PPA, in India, which Helen greatly supported. She highly praised Margaret and others working for reproductive rights in a letter she sent to Margaret. She wrote how the PPA will allow every child that is born to be properly taken care of and how it will combat overpopulation. Helen deeply respected Margaret Sanger and called her the woman Prometheus of humanity's highest physical and mental welfare. She supported the women's rights movement, was an early supporter of NAACP, and was an opponent of lynchings. As a deafblind woman, she knew what it was like to feel overlooked and fought to bring equality to people in many ways.
It is the attitude disappointment in not being able to speak normally.
It is the acute disappointment in not being able to speak normally.
Helen Keller devoted over 40 years of her later life to raising funds for the American Foundation for the Blind. After she turned 80, she somewhat retired to her home in Wrentham, no longer traveling or touring around the world. On June 1st, 1968, Helen Keller passed away. Her ashes are kept in the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. next to her teacher, Anne Sullivan. This is a testament to the lifelong bond they shared, ensuring they'll be together even after their deaths. Helen Keller is vital to disability history. Keller traveled to 39 countries to persuade foreign governments to establish schools for the deaf and blind. She advocated for programs for preventing blindness, laws for the education of deafblind citizens, and assisted programs to help the disabled with job training and placement. She influenced the world to look beyond physical limitations and stereotypes. Today, many people don't know the full impact of her story, as many of the groups she was part of were viewed as too radical. However, activists are fighting for more disability representation and education. In 1990, the Capitol Crawl urged people with disabilities to climb the steps of the Capitol to urge the passage of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. This event was considered historic and helped pass the law 4 months later, yet it is rarely included in public school education. In Helen Keller, we find the power of resilience, determination, and the human spirit. Through her partnership with Anne Sullivan, she paved the way for education for the disabled and redesigned society perceptions of what is possible. Her journey reminds us that limitations exist only in the mind and that we can surpass any obstacle with courage and perseverance. The legacy of Helen Keller continues to inspire generations by embracing differences and promoting rights. As Helen herself once said, although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. Let her story inspire us all so that we can make our impact and create a world of greater compassion and inclusivity.